Hello, my friends. Welcome. Settle into your favorite corner, lean back, and grab a hot, strong tea or steaming cup of coffee. After our last conversation, I sat down, reevaluated some things from top to bottom, and realized that some stones weren't quite sitting right. Today, we aren't going to have an ordinary history lesson. Today, we're going to have a heart-to-heart, a confrontation. We are going to dissect the true anatomy of one of history's most controversial, intelligent, and yet ostentatious characters, Hermann Göring. But this time, we won't just look at the face of the coin they show us. We'll look at the very wheels that minted it. If you've taken that first sip of your tea or coffee, let's begin. The man we're going to talk about today was, on one hand, a legendary hero of World War I, and on the other, a genius who managed the economic and military mind of an entire nation. Have you ever wondered if history really is just a script written by the victors? If so, why are the truths told by the defeated always swept under the rug? The story of Göring, which begins in fairy tale castles and ends in a dark cell in Nuremberg, gives us the answer to that very rhetorical question. Hermann Wilhelm Göring was born on January 12, 1893. From the outside, his family seemed respectable, but on the inside, it was quite complicated. His father, Heinrich Ernst Göring, was a former Prussian cavalry officer who had been given very difficult assignments by the state. He had first served as the first Governor-General of German Southwest Africa and was later exiled to a consular post in Haiti. As you can understand, his father was constantly abroad due to state duties, working in harsh, debilitating climates. So, what was Göring's mother, Franziska, doing while his father was away? Here is one of the most crucial points of the story. When Heinrich Göring retired, all he had was a small civil servant's pension, which was never enough to support a large family, let alone live an aristocratic life. It was precisely during this period of poverty and longing for a father that a very wealthy doctor and businessman of Jewish descent named Hermann von Eppenstein entered the family's life. Amidst the family's financial troubles and her husband's constant absence, his mother Franziska became Eppenstein's mistress. What is even more striking is that his father Heinrich, for the sake of the family's economic survival and to ensure a good future for his children, remained silent and seemingly accepted the situation. As for young Hermann, why did he feel such great love and admiration for this godfather? My friends, think about child psychology. His father was distant and old, and there were money problems at home. But Eppenstein came and gave them fairy tale castles like Weldenstein and Moderndorf to live in. In those castles, hunting horns sounded, servants bustled about, and they were raised in luxury and wealth, almost like medieval knights. For Hermann Göring, Eppenstein was not just a godfather. He was an absolute hero who rescued the family from poverty and handed him the admired luxury, splendor, and childhood fantasy on a silver platter. How could a person not love the man who provided such abundance and magnificence? The seeds of Göring's lifelong passion for luxury, castles, art, and ostentation were sown right there, in the opulent life offered by this Jewish godfather. When his youth arrived, Göring joined the army with that endless energy and warrior spirit inside him. When World War I broke out, he first fought in the trenches, even contracting rheumatism from the damp. But he wasn't a man to die in the mud. With the help of his friend Bruno Lurzer, he transferred to the Air Force, even at the risk of breaking the rules. That is where he became a legend. He shot down 22 enemy planes in the sky, earning Germany's most prestigious medal, the Pour le Mérite. In fact, when the famous Red Baron Manfred von Richthofen died, Göring was personally appointed commander of his legendary Flying Circus Squadron. He was a genuine, decorated war hero who risked death in the sky for his country. When the war ended, he could never accept Germany's shameful surrender, and the scenes of leftist groups tearing the epaulets off officers' shoulders in the streets. This feeling of betrayal drove him toward nationalist ideas and, eventually, to meet Adolf Hitler in 1922. For Hitler, Göring was a huge lottery win, because unlike Hitler, Göring was a respected name who could sit at the same table with the upper classes, the aristocracy, and the wealthy. Göring immediately took charge of the SA and transformed that ragtag group into an organized unit of 11,000 men in a short time. However, the famous beer hall putsch in 1923 changed everything. Göring was shot very badly in the groin by police fire. To avoid arrest, he fled in agony with his wife Karin to Austria and then to Sweden. My friends, the morphine addiction that would hold Göring captive for the rest of his life began right there, with the injections given to relieve the unbearable pain of those bullet wounds. The pain was so terrible that morphine slowly took hold of him, and he even suffered such severe crises that he was institutionalized in Sweden and put in a straitjacket. That heroic pilot had become a man exiled from his homeland, writhing in pain. My friends, let's pause here for a moment and examine the matter of his famous brother, Albert Göring. Nowadays, some circles are very eager to portray Albert as a hero, an anti-Nazi angel. But if we look at the truth of the matter from the perspective of the state and the nation, what we see is a very serious picture of betrayal and opportunism. Albert, unlike his brother Hermann, was not a man who put his shoulder to the wheel for his state. But you see, when it came to his own comfort and luxury, he never hesitated to use the immense weight of the gun surname to his full advantage. Can you imagine? While his brother Hermann was shouldering the economy, the military and politics in Germany's struggle for existence, working day and night, Albert was comfortably installed in an extremely cushy and influential position as export director at the Skoda factories in Czechoslovakia simply because he was Hermann Göring's brother. And what did he use this position for? To serve his country? No, taking shelter behind the protective shield and position his brother provided him. Albert smuggled out people the state considered enemies and turned a blind eye to the underground resistance and sabotage activities in Czechoslovakia. He went even further, forging his brother Hermann's signature to create fake documents and committing forgery with transit passes. No matter how you look at it, this was a clear betrayal of the brother who gave him that power and status, and a betrayal of his own nation's war efforts. The Gestapo, of course, was not stupid. They tracked Albert's treasonous activities and his scheming step by step, purporting his collaboration with saboteurs. They issued arrest warrants and even death sentences for him multiple times. And what did Albert do? The moment he was caught, all that anti-Nazi courage vanished, and he immediately tried to save his skin by saying, "Go talk to my brother Hermann." And the most tragic part is that Iron Man Hermann Göring, the tough leader who would sacrifice even his closest comrades for the survival of the state, saved this traitor from the Gestapo's clutches every single time, purely out of fraternal bond and family love. Albert was an opportunist who sucked on his brother's power and sabotaged him from within, weakening the state underhandedly. Portraying him as a hero is nothing but whitewashing the actions of someone who lived off his brother's back and then betrayed him. Now take a solid sip of your coffee, because we are heading to the famous Nuremberg Trials. Germany was defeated, and Göring had surrendered to the Americans. When they threw him in prison, they took that fat, drug-addicted man and detoxed him in his cell. Freed from the drugs, Göring suddenly returned to his old, sharp, energetic intelligence. He scored 138 on an IQ test. That means very superior intelligence. All the psychologists in the courtroom had hoped to find a madman, but instead they found an extremely intelligent man who knew exactly what he was doing, a master of manipulation, and someone who had not a shred of doubt about his own truths. During the trial, some claims were made that Göring tried to shift the blame onto others, especially the deceased Himmler. My friends, this is a completely baseless slander. In that courtroom, Göring did not squirm like the others, saying, "I was just following orders. I had no knowledge. It was all Himmler's fault." Do you know what he told the psychologist questioning him about Himmler? "I don't give a damn about my own neck. They can hang me or my plane can crash. But this is a matter of honor. Do you think I would deliver Himmler to the enemy? As guilty as he was, damn it, if it had been in my power, I would have eliminated that bastard with my own hands." Göring saw Himmler's secret negotiations with the enemy at the end of the war as a betrayal. and said he would have personally punished him for this dishonor had he the power. So, he never stooped to the cowardice of trying to clear himself by pinning the blame on him. So, what kind of defense did Göring present in court? Rather than defending himself, he chose to tear off the justice mask of the Allies. When American Chief Prosecutor Robert H. Jackson tried to corner him, Göring, with his intelligence, made a mockery of Jackson, humiliating him to the point of nervous breakdowns. In that hall, Göring voiced the legendary truth that slapped the entire Western world in the face. He said, "You are not judging us here for justice, but because we lost the war." Listen carefully to his historic words. Der Sieger wird immer der Richter und der Bezierte stets der Angeklagte sein, meaning the victor will always be the judge, and the vanquished will always be the accused. He threw the imperialist past of America and England in their faces, practically mocking them. He said exactly this to the American psychologist in his cell, after America swallowed California and half of Mexico, leaving us with nothing. Suddenly, territorial expansion became a crime. It has been this way for centuries, and it will continue to be this way. Göring was sending a very clear message. You are no different from us. England, Russia, and America all crushed other nations for their own national interests. You just happen to be playing the role of the good guys now because you won the war. If victory had been ours, you would be the ones sitting in the defendant's chair. We must not forget his brutal but ice-cold sociological observation about the public. Of course, the common people don't want war. Not in Russia, not in England, not in America. But it is always easy to drag the people along with the leaders, whether it is a democracy or a dictatorship. All you have to do is tell them they are under attack and accuse the pacifists of lacking patriotism. It works the same way in every country. These words are the expression of that universal, dark formula of power and statecraft. And the end of the story. On October 1st, 1946, Göring was sentenced to death, specifically to death by hanging. As a hero of World War I, the commander-in-chief of the Air Force and the Reichsmarschall, he requested death by firing squad a soldier's death. However, the Allies rejected this request in order to humiliate him and decided he should hang like a common criminal. But Hermann Göring was not a man to give his enemies that pleasure. He had always held the strings in life, and he did the same in death. Just 2 hours before his execution, he bit down on a potassium cyanide capsule he had managed to keep hidden in his cell and committed suicide. In the letter he left behind, he expressed his final contempt for the Allies with these words: "I would have had no objection to being shot. However, I will not facilitate the hanging of the Reichsmarschall of Germany. For the sake of Germany, I cannot permit this. I feel no moral obligation to submit to the punishment of my enemies. For this reason, I have chosen to die just like the great Hannibal." He robbed the Allies of the most important piece of their grand justice show, the sight of himself swinging from the gallows. Even in death, he had the last laugh. Yes, my friends, today we talked about Hermann Göring without fitting him into a single mold, from his ostentatious admiration for his godfather to his warrior spirit on the front, from the betrayal of a brother like Albert to his uncompromising defense in Nuremberg that shattered hypocrisy. History is not just a fairy tale of good and evil. History is a brutal documentary of what is sacrificed for power, and how the victors hang their own crimes around the necks of the defeated. Think about these things as you take the last sip of your tea or coffee. The language of power in the world has never changed. Only the uniforms and the excuses have. Take good care of yourselves until our next chat, and keep reading, questioning, and looking at the other side of the coin. Goodbye for now.